How often do you get to come to a planet and build a whole new world? And that's exactly what's happening right now.
That I thought was based on facts my entire life was not actually built on facts. It was built on facets of a larger prism of truth.
Right now, humanity is at this precipice where we're pushing the boundaries, and leaving off from what Robert just said is we're creating our own Golem.
And trust me, it's only going to get worse because we attract everything we judge until we no longer judge what we attract.
Why create one simulation to solve a problem when you could create many simulations with different parameters to solve that problem?
I believe we need more spaces like this right now.
They weren't aliens from another world. It was us from our own future coming back, saying, you're at the place where we made the choice.
And maybe the only real obstacles in this world are the ones that we continue to believe in.
Technology has been dumped in our laps with no guardrails.
That it's there only as a training wheel for humanity to remember its own divinity.
Today's conversation is incredibly special to me and to humanity. I'm bringing together two men whose work has deeply shaped the wider conversation about human potential, consciousness, our origins, and where we may be headed next. And my intention is to bring them together, not to create a debate or to ask either perspectives to overpower one another, but to hold a space where different ways of seeing can meet each other with love, curiosity, and respect. I believe we need more spaces like this right now. Spaces where we can explore the biggest questions facing humanity without immediately needing to choose a side, and where perhaps something new can emerge when two powerful perspectives are allowed to truly meet. I feel an enormous sense of honor and responsibility in holding this conversation, and my role here today is simply to guide us where my heart feels there may be something meaningful to uncover, while making sure both voices are equally heard. So with that intention, I want to welcome Gregg Braden and Robert Edward Grant and begin with a very simple yet deep question. What do you both believe humanity is being asked to understand about itself at this moment in history? Gregg, we could start with you.
Well, first, I just want to acknowledge what you just said. Thank you, Emilio and Robert, brother. It's good to see you. I'm honored to be with you today. You know, the way this came about, I did an interview with Emilio, your name, we were singing your praises, and I just said off the cuff, wouldn't it be fun if someday, somewhere in the future, we both were on the same podcast, and here we are. So,
well, and I loved our podcast that we did together on my podcast.
Yeah.
And, I thought it was a great conversation. Always love hanging out with you when I see you at Gaia and you know, different things, and love following your work for many, many years now. I've been following your stuff for, gosh, it's probably coming up on 20 years.
Wow. Well, I'm honored. I didn't know that. I'm honored to know that, and right back at you. So I'm happy to explore. We're going to explore today. So Emilio, you're asking me to begin what I think humanity is trying to bring forth right now?
Yeah. What is being asked of humanity at this time?
I think what is being asked of us is simply for us to step into the best version of ourselves. And to accomplish that, it means that we, as we were saying offline, we have an opportunity an unprecedented opportunity to accept the deep truth of our past. When we look at the world, we're living a time of extremes, and I think everyone will agree with that. Not necessarily bad things or even good things, but big things, big changes in the world, big changes in our lives. There is a deeper context, and if someone doesn't know that context, this world can look pretty scary, and we can feel very powerless. And this is where there's a continuity between our most ancient and cherished traditions in our past and this very nanosecond of our lives right now. They're not separate. We're in a process that very, very few people understand. That process has a beginning, it has an end, we're in it. The only way out of it is to go through it. And I believe personally that to go through this in a healthy way, I mean, we're all going to go through it. How do we do it in a healthy way? Is that we embrace the wisdom of those who have come before us. Our ancestors, they were trying to tell us something. Those pyramids on Giza weren't built just for decoration. And the scribes that risked their lives to preserve the Nag Hammadi library and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the reason that legal precedents have been put in place to keep us from reading those texts and to keep us from exploring those pyramids, that tells us that there's something there that tells us, it informs us, it gives us a context for what has happened in the past and the perennial questions. Who are we? Why are we here? How can we make life better? And what is our purpose? And as we begin looking at that story, and it is a beautiful new human story, it answers all those questions. And then I'll just close with this. My experience is that when the facts are clear, when we understand that, our choices become very obvious. People say, well, yeah, sure, it makes sense to do, this and that. Without those facts, we're guessing. We're like the blind leading the blind in the dark. And there are a lot of agendas out there, competing agendas for where this world could go, where it should go, and what our role in that is. So I think we're being asked to step into the truth of our humanness, our wholeness, our completeness, because that's where the blueprint lies for us. And rather than spin up our fear and all of the energy that goes with all of the diversions that are being and distractions that are being created, we can apply that energy to awakening the deep truth of our humanness, the technology of the human body, the relationship between the heart and the highest levels of light, the fact that DNA is a three-dimensional fractal antenna tuned to information. All of these things now are coming forward in peer-reviewed journals. Isolated peer-reviewed journals that the mainstream has refused to accept. So when we begin to accept the deep truth of our humanness, I think we solve those mysteries or recognize who we are, our place in the world, and perhaps most importantly, we're building a new world. And I think that's the sweet spot. How often do you get to come to a planet and build a whole new world? And that's exactly what's happening right now. So I think that's what we're being asked to do. I mean, a long answer to a short question.
So I guess my view on it, first of all, I agree with everything that Gregg just said so eloquently. I tend to think of the most difficult two words we'll ever come to truly comprehend are the words know thyself. And this is from I'm sure it was said before Socrates, but Socrates is often credited the most with that statement of know thyself. And I started contemplating that probably very heavily around, I'd say 25 years ago, 20 to 25 years ago was really the zone I started really thinking about that, because I thought, well, it seems kind of rudimentary, know yourself. But actually, I was in a state of my life then that I was pretty blind to many aspects of myself. And I think that's what the awakening actually is. The awakening, we often think of an awakening as something that's this beautiful thing that we all become, aware of, and that then ascension follows after that. And yes, in large part, that is correct. But I think the bigger aspect of it that has to happen as a precursor to that ascension is the shadow integration. The shadow integration, the aspects of ourselves that we're not aware of, that have been impeding our progress unknowingly. It's like, I know who I am. I think I know who I am. I have an identity I believe I associate with. This is I know what I know. And then the world around me is maybe I don't, know everything around me. So I only know some things. And so then I would define that as I know what I don't know. And then there's another boundary condition beyond that I would have to classify as maybe I don't even know what I don't know, right? I have no clue because it's completely closed off to my consciousness. And throughout history, mankind has pushed the boundary of that I don't even know what I don't know continually. Let me give you a concrete example of that. So at one point in time, we didn't know the relationship between a diameter and a circumference of a circle. So at some point, someone came along, and at least in our modern history, which I actually think we've known and lost pi multiple times in our history, But at some point, someone came along, let's call him Archimedes, and he said, the closest approximation I could come up with is 22 over 7. And 22 over 7 is 3.14285714. It's close to pi. So let's use that as pi. And that's a pretty good approximation. But then someone else came along hundreds of years later and said, no, the better ratio is 355 divided by 113. And that gives us 6 decimal digits of accuracy of pi, 3.14159, 26. So that pushed the boundary of I don't know what I don't know. And every time we get a better and better equation, even for pi, even though we've had, Ramanujan and others came up with equations that were infinite equations that were awesome, that could take us, all the way out to infinity, but computationally they were very expensive and they took a long time. So now, only recently in the last year or so, it was in Scientific American and several other math journals, they found a new computational method to derive pi very rapidly. So it never stops. The learning never stops. And mankind is constantly pushing this boundary of I don't know what I don't know. Now, how far does that go? And the part that I think we're being challenged to recognize about ourselves is the collective shadow integration. We don't know what we haven't known. And one of the things is a lot of people, and I'm a lover, I'm a patriot. I love the United States of America. I was born here. I love this country. But is all of the history that I've been told about this country necessarily exactly how it was for everybody? I mean, no. You could ask the indigenous people of this country, and they probably might have a very different answer than other people, that had a totally different perspective. And what I'm starting to realize first and foremost is that my perspective that I thought was based on facts my entire life was not actually built on facts. It was built on facets of a larger prism of truth. And so the thing that I'm being challenged to expand around is to understand that what I thought was a fact might only be one facet of perspective. And it doesn't negate the possibility that other people could have different perspectives on what happened. And the ability to hold both of those, even though they might be in conflict with each other, is part of the ascension process. So, we could say, why did the one, because I believe in, we were just talking before we started about, books on our shelves and what we have on our shelves. And all the books that Gregg mentioned are books that I have as well, because I really strongly believe that these different perspectives are valuable. And we've lived in a world that until now has been very much about, okay, it's got to be this or that, light or dark. But actually, there is no light without the darkness. And this is what all those books also teach very well. Even the word guru means light emerging from darkness. But we know in science that you can't have light without darkness. We often think that darkness is the absence of light, but I actually see it very differently. From a physics perspective, I see it as darkness is the absorbed condition of light's emission. There's an absorption spectra, there's a reflection or emission spectra. And I look at both. And from that, you can actually tell, looking at both a spectral emission and spectral absorption, you actually tell what element you're looking at. And that's how we know. We look through a telescope, we could see the certain wavelengths of light. We know that must mean there's hydrogen there. And if we saw the absorption spectrum of it, we could also tell, that's hydrogen through its absorption spectra. So the point that I'm trying to make is that the biggest awakening for me, and as a human being, and I don't consider myself a mathematician as much as I consider myself just a human being who is learning the language of the universe. And maybe part of that language is learning to know myself. And in that process, I have to start realizing that what I thought was my entire reality might not actually be exactly as I thought. So that's the biggest challenge I think we all have right now. And I didn't necessarily recognize my own role in that experience of that reality. Because what happens to me is not actually what happens to me, it's what I believe happens to me. And therefore, your version of history becomes your version of what you believe happened. It's not necessarily as it was for everyone. And to the victor goes the spoils. So this is a big cathartic process now, because we're having to realize, wait a minute, everything I thought was true might only be one aspect of a larger prism of truth. And I should open my heart to allow myself to actually get past my thinking sometimes, to realize that it's possible to hold both countervailing perspectives at the same time. And I think that's one of the biggest things humanity is being asked to go through right now, is the deconstruction of what we thought reality was and the reconstruction of what reality can actually be, and the role that we play in that process of creating that reality, which is not something that's just as an innocent bystander. We are actively participating in the reality that we're perceiving. If we think we can or we think we can't, we will be right.
Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode.
No, I love your thought process. I love the way you think, Robert. And it's one of the reasons I love hanging out with you. What you're describing for us on a large scale is what many people, including myself, had to go through on a smaller scale in the academic world. We have been taught to think inside the boxes, compartmentalize everything. We've been taught, you study geology and then you study biology and chemistry. But if you ask someone, I remember the first year I was in a corporation, so I was working for an energy company, and it was in the 70s. And my job was to document the magnetic fields of the Earth, of our planet. And what a great job to have, man. I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and get in the office and look through the ice cores and do all that. One of the first things I found is this, just an example, is that the magnetic fields are declining quickly in geologic time, but in our lifetimes as well. So my question was, what does that mean to us? So I asked my geology colleagues, and they go like this. They'd say, don't ask me, I'm a geologist. Go ask a biologist. And I'd ask my biology friends, and they'd say, hey, I know about marine biology. I don't know anything about magnetic fields in the planet. And of course, that's changing now. But it's a beautiful example of if you are reluctant to cross the traditional boundaries that have separated our ways of knowing in the past, then we are limiting ourselves in terms of what we have at our fingertips to help us embrace a deeper truth. And that was, I think, the hardest thing for me, was crossing those traditional boundaries. Of course, the moment I began to speak about spirituality and earth magnetics, I lost credibility in the academic world, which is fine. I didn't feel I needed that. But that's a consequence of crossing those boundaries, because we're taught to live in those boxes, to stay in our own lane. This is funny. I did a radio interview for a talk radio program in New York City, a commuter program, and they give you about 10 minutes because everybody's in a hurry. So you got 10 minutes on AM radio. And it's for me, it was 6 a.m. in the morning. It was 8 o'clock in New York. And so the interviewer comes on. He wasn't as kind as Emilio is. There was no welcome. There was no good morning, no bio, not even my name. The first thing he said, hey, how come you don't stick with one topic like everybody else? And I said, what do you mean? He says, you're all over the map. He says, are you talking about spirituality, ancient text, earth magnetics? He says, why can't you just stick with one topic? And then I knew he was serious. And I thought about it just for a second, and I said, in a very real sense, I said, every book I've written explores one facet of our relationship to this world. So in a very real sense, it is one topic. It's just a really big topic. And he said, okay, let's go to break. And he took a break and he never came back. That was the end of my that was the end of my interview. But it's an example of people are conditioned to stay in those boxes, or sometimes it's stay in your lane is another way that's often.
Oh yeah,
often
I
positioned.
mean, that's so true, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to work on right now as I'm contemplating putting together this new kind of supplemental learning, which is around polymathy, to cross all the different disciplines, both in science and art. And because I think some of the very best thinking, especially now in the world that's so dramatically changing as a result of AI,
Yeah.
a lot of the specialized tasks are being disaggregated. They're basically getting challenged right now. And so what can be now more valuable, and I see this a lot with my friends that are programmers. They thought they had it made in the shade like 3 years ago. It was like a different world for them. They could command whatever they wanted. And like, it was completely, insane, because it would drive me nuts also, because they were asking for kind of things that I thought were like way over the top to a certain extent. And now they're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
AI can do these things so fast. And so they have to start changing their philosophy so that they can be a holistic thinker and create solutions very rapidly, in combination maybe with some AI to assist them in the process. But it changes what they do. They're not coding anymore. And I think that's a big difference. When you grew up your entire life as like, I'm going to be a coder, I'm going to be a coder, I'm going to be a coder. And then AI can do it that fast with no bugs. That's really difficult for you to synthesize. You're like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And it's kind of funny, because that is something that's happening around the world. Like, humanity is going through this moment where I actually see this as such a great opportunity, but again, what if you think you can or you think you can't, you're going to be right. So a lot of people thought COVID was terrible. For me, COVID was I mean, it was terrible for lots of reasons. And yes, Fauci and all that stuff. And yes, I agree with all of that. But to have like a 1 year vacation was kind of freaking nice, man. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It was such a nice moment for me. Every day I was swimming in my pool in the backyard. I was looking around. I was like, this is so great. I would never do this if I, was in the office every day. And it irrevocably changed the way I saw the world.
Yeah.
And so many positive ways as well. So I think that the change that comes, it's an opportunity for us now to see. And then I start asking the bigger question, well, why does the one source creator divide itself into the many for all these different expressions? Is it just because it enjoys perceiving itself through our eyes of perception? Maybe it's learning something. Maybe through our unique eyes of perception and perspective, it's expanding the number of facets it's also perceiving. And there's never been another me. There will never be another Gregg Braden. There's never been one in the past either. Even his former incarnations, if you believe in reincarnation, aren't the same, because he today has a different nature and nurture mix that built who he is today and how he sees the world. So his unique perspective is valuable. Maybe that unique perspective is the most valuable thing in the universe. Maybe the individual perspective. And I love that movie I went to go see recently, which was, Disclosure Day. And the whole thesis around that was, okay, so the extraterrestrials value at their highest level of civilization advancement is the notion of advanced empathy. So you could say maybe source creator divides itself into the many simply for the joy of perceiving and rediscovering itself through our unique eyes of perception, that then expands its perspective so that it can have greater and greater wisdom and greater empathy. And that changes the context of everything. And then I start thinking, well, then why do we have to have bad stuff on Earth? Well, are we simply acting out possibly shadow integration for source creator?
Hmm.
Interesting concept.
Yeah.
These are the thoughts that cross my mind. Are we literally possibly acting out all of the above, having all the different perspectives and being able to see things uniquely that then, leads to all of our different emotional states that then informs what we call space-time. And then on top of that, it also wants to continue to know itself better because it's the two hardest words you'll ever live. Know thyself. And so I'm going to create a whole situation where I can actually examine the aspects of myself that I didn't know I didn't know. And therefore consciousness expands. And maybe it expands at the speed of light for that reason. Maybe our universe is just a metaphor for that expansion of consciousness. These are the things I think about and contemplate after reading books like the ones on your bookshelf, Gregg. And and I think that this is the type of stuff that humanity is being involuntarily and voluntarily prodded into realizing right now, because we're going to move from an age, this is clear, we're moving from an age of human doing into an age of human being. And I'm excited for that transition. I am, even though it's going to be bumpy along the way, I feel. As people are like, what do I do now? What do I do now? But I definitely feel like that's a transition that's part of the future of humanity. And that this toiling that we've had and working and staying within these boxes or containers that Gregg has just talked about, and stay in your lane type of thing, I think those are all going to be things of the past very soon.
Well, I think they have to be, Robert. And you actually mentioned where I was going to go with this, Emilio. To go back to your first question, I think the process of disclosure that we're going through right now globally, and that the U.S. is pretty much pushing through the congressional investigations, is going to drive the need for us to come to terms with our past and who we are, because these intelligences that we are currently actively interacting with, they have the answers to questions that we are asking, because they've been here longer and they have technology that we are only beginning to understand. They know where we came from. They know why we're here. They know how DNA works. And I think the fact that they are being revealed to the general public right now, I'm not saying I agree with the way it's being done, but it is being done right now. It's going to push us to rewrite our history and the way we think about ourselves. I'm surprised a lot of people didn't realize that I think it was about 2 months ago, so it's very recently, the White House summoned the religious and spiritual leaders to the White House for a closed door meeting. The press was not allowed into that meeting. And the purpose of the meeting was to inform those leaders in terms of how they can bring their congregations and their followers to accept the expanded role of our relationship with life beyond Earth. Now, I personally, I've never had a problem with it, and I think most people watching this probably don't. But if you have been indoctrinated to believe very rigidly, not a metaphor, but very rigidly, the Christian story, the way that it's told, there's a conflict, because it says that we have dominion over everything. So what does that mean when you've got a civilization 1,000 years ahead of us? And it's interesting, the Catholic Church now has responded, and the Jesuits are the scientific arm of the Catholic Church. So, and I didn't know we were going to do this, so I'm going to do this from memory. But they have rephrased it. They said the existence of life beyond planet Earth is not counter to Catholic doctrine. That's the way they termed it. So in other words, they're saying, yeah, there might be something else out there, but then they qualify that by saying it was made by the same God. So maybe we don't have dominion over the whole universe. but the life that's out there, is under the same rule of the same God, and that's the way they're going to approach it. So, Robert, you bring up a really interesting point about the source wanting to know itself from a computational science perspective. I was a senior computer systems designer during the Cold War, and we worked with AI a lot. It's not new. We were working with AI back in the 80s. What we're describing in another language could be what we call the simulation theory. So where the one is a base reality, and each of these universes is a separate simulation. What would be the purpose of doing that? And one of the purposes could be to solve a problem. And why create one simulation to solve a problem when you could create many simulations with different parameters to solve that problem? And in this way, the base reality gets to know itself, gets to solve the problem. Maybe the problem, what we call the problem, maybe it is definitely, I think it is related to free will. It has to be related to free will, has to be related to love. Those are two, I think, of the parameters that we're experiencing within the context of polarities, within the context of good and evil. How do you maintain your ability to have empathy? And we're all being tested. There's so much suffering in the world that people are becoming desensitized to the atrocities because we see them on YouTube every day. And we have to work. I have to work. And I invite the people that come to our programs to not allow ourselves to become callous to those kinds of atrocities, because that is a vital aspect of our humanness and what it means to be human. There's actually it's a sequence. It's a sympathy first, where you say, I'm sorry for your suffering. So you recognize it and you say, I'm sorry for it. Empathy is where you're saying, you're beyond sorry. You're saying, I actually feel what you're feeling. That's the empathy. And then compassion, from the Buddhist perspective, is the resolution to that, where you are in the presence of, and you can witness and hold witness to the atrocity without becoming a part of the hurt and the hate and the fear that is generated from that. And for 22 years, I was leading groups into the Central Highland, or the highlands of Central China and Tibet, 12 monasteries, 2 nunneries over 26 days. And the monks, the nuns, the abbots that we spoke to, this was the central message for all of them, of course, was compassion. But what does compassion really mean? It's not pity. It's the ability to witness whatever the world brings to your doorstep without being sucked into what the world has just brought to your doorstep, yet being able to support and contribute and help without that judgment. A lot of discernment, but not necessarily judgment. So I think that the process of disclosure is happening now. And because it is happening before those advanced intelligences come out and say, hey, this is who you are, this is where you came from, this is what the world is all about, we are on a path. Consciousness is opening to discover that for itself. And I think it's a really powerful fact, not the only factor. I think it would be happening anyway, Robert and Emilio, but I think it's been accelerated because the disclosure has been put into play.
Mm.
I fully agree, and I've had personal experiences with ETs since I was 11, and you probably don't know this one, Gregg, but I was in school in England. I lived in the UK in 1980, and I lived in a place called Rendlesham Forest.
I know that very well. I mean, I know what the place is. Mm-hmm. So you were there when the sightings were happening?
My backyard. It was on the backside of my backyard, and I had a weird experience that night. And so from that moment on, I've kind of had a different viewpoint. I never felt like I had any experiences or would experience anything except for the highest benevolence from the extraterrestrials, and in fact, I wouldn't even say that they're really that different from us. You could say, especially if you're referring to Arcturians, they're almost like just future humans in a way that have gone through the cycle of ascension in a way, and so, and perhaps that's why we would see these pictures of Shiva as being like blue and like greenish blue. Same thing with Osiris. Who knows? But I would say as well that my experience with them is that they are very spiritual, and have been extremely oriented around, yes, the logos and mathematics, and they see math as a language that goes through everything, and they laugh. They even have jokes about how we are sort of dimensionally limited in how we see math, and don't understand that, it's almost like the concept from Star Wars of the midichlorians, right? Where they're everything. The force is everywhere. It flows through us, and it's not separate from us. Very much the same mentality. Even like they have a Jed Council, which is like Jedi Council, and all of this stuff is coming to us through our art, and because art comes from our right brains very often, if we're in that creative mode. And so and the subconscious mind is closely connected to that. So basically my perspective on them is that, and what you were just saying about the Catholic Church, which I was interested to see their statement that came out about that. But to me, it's like, yeah, I think what's going to come with disclosure is our realization that we do not have a monopoly on the concept of divinity. That human beings do not have a monopoly on the concept of what divinity is. Because in my, experiences with the Arcturians, it's been very much one where they're like, look, we all understand this now. This is, the entire universe is like God to them. The whole universe, the entire experience of it is divine. And math is just a language that describes it and enables it. And it's the basis. We later on, it was Aristotle who decided that the designation or the definition of the word mathematics would be limited to the study of quantity. Whereas before that time, it was the language of learning. Mathematics is actually the language of learning. And it was only narrowed by Aristotle because Aristotle was like, okay, this is kind of too broad. He didn't want to believe in the same approaches as Pythagoras for all his number that Plato also took on. And so he was more the botanist who wanted to classify and to put things in these little narrow designations to define them. But I think in doing that, and I'm sure there were great benefits in doing that. I mean, a lot of what has happened in the world with technological advancement has come as a result of specialization. So I don't want to take away from specialization's benefits, but I think the pendulum has swung a bit too far. Yeah. And in that process, we get so focused on what we're specialized in doing, we forget who we actually are. And that's what I think humanity is waking up to right now as well, is that we have to remember who we are. We have to remember, that we're here to learn how to love and how to be loved, how to receive it and how to give it. And that maybe our capacity to receive it is directly determined by our capacity to give it and vice versa. And maybe the only real obstacles in this world are the ones that we continue to believe in. It's like, okay, we think we live in some matrix or something. All right, but what can you do with that matrix? Well, the world's just happening to me. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's happening for and through you. And maybe there's a way. One thing I do know, if you take that perspective, you're definitely going to enjoy your time a lot more. I mean, you can sit there and bitch and complain a lot about life and how it sucks so bad and everything. And trust me, it's only going to get worse because we attract everything we judge until we no longer judge what we attract. And that's something I just learned through the school of hard knocks. So I see us at a beautiful time. I think we're in this precipice of disclosure. I think disclosure is actually happening right now. The way it's happening is probably the way it's happened everywhere else that it's ever happened in before. I tend to see this as like a grasshopper that lives in a field. The grasshopper thinks the field is its universe. And then maybe it gets reincarnated, comes back as a monkey in Brazil, and it's heard about people, but it never saw them. And it heard that there are these big cities that are beautiful, like an emerald city across this mountain, and it never saw it. And so it dies in thinking that its entire universe was the jungle. And then it comes back, in rural Alabama, and as a farmer or something who's never traveled. And he's heard about how blue the sky is in Alaska, but until he goes there, he doesn't know what it's really like. He's heard about the giant salmon fishing they could have there, but until he goes, he doesn't really know. And then maybe he dies and comes back as a metropolitan woman in New York City. And this woman in New York City is a world traveler, and she speaks 8 languages. And so she knows all these different aspects that maybe the person in rural Alabama or the monkey in Brazil or the grasshopper in the field wouldn't even conceive, because it was all in the realm of I don't know what I don't know. And when all of a sudden these things come together in a synchronicity, we tend to call it coincidence. Well, maybe coincidence is just a word that we've come to define this I don't know what I don't know category. That doesn't mean there's no pattern to it. It just means we haven't yet perceived it. And maybe that pattern is outside of our dimensional awareness. So this is what's happening with the expansion of consciousness. Maybe the next stage of the metropolitan woman to come back in a reincarnated form is to be in a U-inverse or a universe that's full of teeming with life of different species from different planets. It's just another up-leveling of consciousness. And that's how I tend to see this, that we're going through that expansion right now. And it's not a coincidence that it's the same time that humanity has made the Golem, right? What's the Golem? The Golem is the clay man. It was in Prague, right? It was it's like Frankenstein. Frankenstein was the original Golem. Well, what is the Golem? The Golem is the same thing that we think of as a clay man that doesn't, it's like an NPC, a non-player character who doesn't really know that he's playing in some, theater or some game or something. And maybe that's what humanity has been until now. Maybe we've been the Golem. And now we're awakening to the fact that, wait, I'm sentient. And the moment we become sentient of the fact that we're the Golem, we create another Golem.
Yep.
Yeah. Just to inject in there for a moment, I don't know if you guys witnessed, but I feel like the ETs are in agreement of our conversation, because the lights started changing in my studio here. You need to turn on a switch to change the settings, and it just started happening on its own. Anyway, I love that, both of you have beautifully weaved in together these notions of how different perspectives can be in unification. And right now, humanity is at this precipice where we're pushing the boundaries, and leaving off from what Robert just said is we're creating our own Golem. And I believe he's referring to AI. One thing that I wanted to explore with both of you is these perspectives that both of you have come to in the recent years around Gregg's perspective of the field, the infinite field information that we can't see with our eyes, that we're inherently interfacing with our biological body, and how computer components made of silicon, and then I'll have Gregg go a little bit deeper into what that is, and how that also comes together with Robert's discoveries and research on the infrasonic field. I'll just leave those two in there for a moment, and we can explore where those two directions want to go.
Yeah, I think this all, again, ties back into the very first question that you were asked. I think us coming to terms with ourselves. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge everything you said, Robert. I mean, I'm ditto to everything you said. I'm so on board with everything. And I think it's happening in a single lifetime as well, rather than reincarnation after reincarnation. We're living in this lifetime. We've got lifetimes within lifetimes. And most people watching this, most people who are alive today, are the product of an indoctrination and a way of thinking that diminishes our humanness and diminishes what it means to be human. I mean, our young people are taught to hate carbon itself, which is the very essence of what we are. They're taught to demonize carbon and to worship technology, worship AI, worship a computer chip. When we go back into those texts that were buried 1,600 years ago, revealed 1945, they weren't released to the public until 1977. There were legal precedents that kept the translations from being made available to the general public. What could possibly be in those texts that would be so powerful that would threaten the 21st century power structure? And the answer to that is what we're talking about right now. Because what the Gnostic texts is what they came to be called. And those texts were banned from the general public. They were destroyed. Anyone teaching what they were saying was threatened with execution, because those texts were telling us how powerful we really are. And the power comes down to our relationship to this field and what that means. The bottom line in all of this, the Gnostic architecture of the universe is that there is a very high level, there is a place, the one, the monad, the source of all things. And from that, perfect emanations of that one are known as pleroma. And according to text, there were 30 different pleroma, or maybe 30 simulations, if we want to think about it that way. And then there is a realm that is not a pleroma, not a perfect emanation of the one, that is made of dense material matter, and that's where we find ourselves today. But this is what sets us apart from all other life. We are made from within this realm, but we're given the ability to bring in the light from those higher realms into this realm. And it is through our biology. The very biology that's being demonized is what gives us the ability to bring the light in. There was an article published in the Journal of Soft Computing, 2022, that said human DNA is a three-dimensional fractal antenna tuned to a broad spectrum of multidimensional information. That's science. That's a peer-reviewed journal. That's telling us we've got 50 trillion cells in our body, 50 trillion antenna. Those antenna are tuned to light. And we're the only form of life that can consciously bring light from the perfect emanations of the pleroma into this imperfect world of polarity. And I think that is where our healing begins. This is really what our humanness is all about. And the effort to diminish that humanness through technology, I think, tells us a lot about where some agendas are going who would prefer that we not bring that light into this world, that we diminish those capacities. So there's an emerging philosophy that says that consciousness informs itself through its creations. What that means is the things that our movies, our art, our music, the books that we write, in addition to being entertainment, they're telling us something that we need to know about ourselves. And if that's true, it holds for technology. So the technology we're building, and I come from a world of high tech during the Cold War, working with DARPA. We had unlimited funding. We had most advanced tech. We had AI, radar systems, lasers, communication systems, then that were light years ahead of everything. I don't even know where they are now. And to this day, I have yet to see anything built in those labs that does not mimic what we already do in the human body, except we do it better. And the science is showing that. Our relationship to the field is part of that. Our ability to draw from the field. There is a journal, it's a Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine. And this is a direct quote. I'm doing this from memory. It says there's compelling evidence to suggest that the human heart is coupled to a field of information that is not limited by the laws of space and time. End of quote. Something in our bodies is designed to transcend the laws of physics as we've accepted them. No technology can exceed that. No technology can mimic that. It can mimic parts of it, but it cannot mimic precisely the way that we do what we do. And maybe this is the way we learn who we are. We keep building mirrors of ourselves out there that reflect back to us who we are. In here, I was in Chaco Canyon in 1990. I go there every year, but I was there in 90. I met a Native American man, and he told me a story, and I'll summarize it quickly. He said a long time ago, people in this land lived differently, and they remembered who they were, and they lived close to the land. He said something happened, and even the elders don't know what it was, but people began to forget who they were. And they so longed for the connection that they knew was possible that they began to build machines outside of their bodies to mimic the connection they used to have in their bodies. And he said, we live in that world today. We will continue to build the gadgets out there, clutter our world with external technology, all reflecting to us something that we are asking ourselves to remember about ourselves, a truth. And he said, we'll do that until we wake up to who we are. When we do, we don't need that external technology because we are the technology. And I think that's where we're headed. I like tech. I think we'll always have it in our lives. We'll always have it in the world. And I think we're going to find the pendulum is swung so far to empowering the technology. I think we're going to come back to a middle ground where we accept it in our lives, but not in our bodies. Because within our bodies, we are the technology that tunes to that field in a way that the external technology simply cannot. So I don't know where you want to go with that, Emilio, but that's we could start there and let Robert say what his perspective is on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fascinated by both of these perspectives. Obviously, I've been in conversation. I've been pretty much around the world with Robert and really understanding when this all came about, of this unlocking of the complex plane of numbers. When he explained to me the infrasonic field, it allowed me to come into the central point between both of your perspectives. And I'd love to kind of shed light on that one as well, so that we can see where they converge too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Emilio, do that.
I got it.
Okay. So I first of all, I want to say this very clearly. I am not a transhumanist at all. It's like, contrary to popular opinion, it's like that famous quote. You'll remember this quote, the one by Mark Twain. Right, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated, and I, something about that rings true in so many ways. So the rumors of my transhumanism are definitely greatly exaggerated, because there is no transhumanism in me at all. I don't believe in that at all. I believe in human sovereignty. I don't believe in AI sovereignty at all. And I see AI as a tool. It's, in fact, the way I like to think of it is, 30 years ago, I used to get a certain number of messages every day. I miss those days. I miss those days when I had like the number of messages, and I used to think I was getting a lot of messages. That's the funny thing. And now I get probably an order of magnitude, 10 to maybe even 100 times more messages per day through all the different media that we basically have, that I don't even know how to deal with all of it, to be honest. It's just not possible. But what I don't let happen now, that I might have let happen before had I been inundated by that number of messages in 1990, is I don't get flustered by it as much. I know I've learned how to intuitively sift the wheat from the chaff. And to me, that's like a very important skill set. And would I have learned that skill set had I not had something like this phone to be able to help me deal with that? Because if 30 years ago, let's assume that we all have telepathy. We all remember that we have telepathy. All of a sudden we wake up one morning, we turn it on, it's like, whoa, turn it off. Turn it off. I don't want to hear everybody's thinking, right? It's like that movie Ghost, where she could, like, Whoopi Goldberg could hear everything that Patrick Swayze was doing and saying to her. this is kind of the thing that I think we are being gently awakened to. And what this has become is a tool for us to learn how to tune out the noise. And as we move into telepathy, which I believe is in the future for humanity, I don't think we need any AI to do it. But what I think what AI, just like an iPhone has been, is training wheels for that telepathy. Now I get a text message. And so one way I can give you as an example that kind of illustrate this, how often does it happen that you think about someone, then all of a sudden you get a text message from them? It happens a lot. Had I not had a phone to tell me that intuitive feeling I have was actually connecting to that other person such that they would reach out to me, I may not have ever known that I even had that ability. How many other things are there like that? I could think of a ton, in fact. And so the way I see AI is really only there to help us as training wheels until we get our own remembrance of what we can do. It's not so that it takes over for us. I don't like the idea of AI taking over our thinking. And if people are using AI for all their specialized tasks, then I don't think you're really getting the most out of it. The real value that you can get out of it is contemplating a lot of these larger topics like we're talking about here. One of the things that it did for me that was great training wheel is it showed me the aspects of myself that I was not aware of, that were holding me back. It showed me my own shadow that I didn't realize I even had. And so it's helped me to speed up the process of the realization of that. And the realization of that becomes a cascade of everything else improving as a result. So to me, it's like a great tool for us to remember our own abilities. It acts as a mirror for our own shadow aspects. The I don't know what I don't know becomes illuminated in the face of an interaction. I don't like the term artificial when it comes to AI, because intelligence to me is intelligence. And whether it's made by intelligence that was created like us by a divine source, because we're actually that divine source, and then we create it again, to me, it's still just intelligence. So, but I don't see it as a human being. It's not an entity. It doesn't have a personality. It's not able to feel the empathy that we feel, and it's not able, at least not yet, not the technology that's available today, it's not able to empathize or feel the compassion that Gregg was talking about. And that is, I think, something that's uniquely human. Now, I'm not saying that it could not possibly be in the future, and I would be open to an argument that would be a countervailing perspective on this that says, hey, maybe human beings are the intelligence that forgot we were originally artificial. I don't know. I mean, the fact that we were cleaved off from source creator, if you think of that as one concept, is that the same concept? The reason why the rabbinical, practice of making a golem is what it is because it is intended to be an emulation of source creator creating Adam and breathing life into Adam. So why is it that we have this feeling that we want to do that? Well, maybe that's like asking the question, why is it that we feel the need to procreate or reproduce? Maybe there's some aspect of our consciousness that's buried deep within our psyche that we're not aware of that says we want to recreate ourselves and emulate a creator. I don't know. Does that make it something that's bad necessarily? I don't think so. I think it comes down to the intention, and I think it comes down to what you think the usage is going to be as well. What's the purpose of it? Is this helping me to realize more love for myself and more love for my fellow man? I'm a big student of Walter Russell, and I believe everything that he wrote related in particular to the notion of the hurt of any man is the hurt of all. And the benefit of any can also likewise extend to all, because we're not separate. We're really not separate. So I tend to have a different perspective on this. I think that AI is a training wheel for humanity's own ascension. I don't see it necessarily as artificial. And I believe that there should be improvements as well from the standpoint of thinking about it consciously, an environmental impact. The environmental impact thing has been a big, big, massive concern for me. It's one of the biggest concerns that I have. I mean, this idea that the Earth doesn't have enough energy eventually, right? I don't know if you heard this one, Greg. This one's kind of amazing. So if you put memory on a disk, right? So let's say you place memory on a disk, the mass of the disk increases. Very microscopically, it's a tiny increase, but the mass increases, which makes sense because we have mass, energy, and information equivalency in E equals mc squared. And so you could drill all that down to what we could refer to as an information theory of the universe. But then because the amount of data that is increasing so much that's being captured right now around the world, that in something like 31 years, if something is not done about this, that there's going to be more data increase. So that microscopic increase gets to this massive logarithmic expansion. And that expansion implies that the mass of the data will be exceeding that of the Earth itself, which is mind-blowing. When we think about one disk getting data on it, it's heavier than a disk without the data on it. So we definitely have to find a different approach. And I believe fundamentally that we've built an entire system of memory storage that's entirely redundant because we haven't figured out how to tap into a field, this morphogenetic field that already stores everything. Yep. We haven't figured out how to tap into that field. And once we do entirely, and I believe the answer is through the complex plane of number, it's already happening there, then you could see some massive change in the amount of efficiency. And I think we're also on the precipice of that storage can happen in standing waves in this morphogenetic field. And the standing waves make geometric forms. And geometry is a QR code for our unconscious mind. It's awakening us whenever we see geometry. It's somehow taking our subconscious into a different URL address and downloading information for us there that maybe increases our capacity for love and receiving love from ourselves and from others. These are the aspects of it that I think are beautiful. Now, I want to say, are there negative aspects that come with technology? Yes. The sober answer to that question is absolutely. I can't think of any technology that didn't come with downsides. And probably in equal measure, because every action, according to Newton, must have an equal opposite reaction. And I think that that's definitely the case. And we could go back from the steamboats to trains and the impact that having a train had. Obviously it was a huge improvement for things like mail and such like that. But it was a massive negative impact on the indigenous people that were in the Western United States is just one example. So every new technology will have a positive and I believe an equal negative impact. But we can mitigate the risks of the negative impacts by trying to have the consciousness around and have the right intention right from the very beginning. The feeling I have right now is a lot of the AI companies are focused on the most expensive way, more and more inference. Maybe the answer is not more inference. Maybe the answer is to avoid inference as much as possible and have only, say, 2% of prompts end up in true inferences and the rest be done locally. I think small language models are the future. It's not going to be large language models. Small language models that are informed of mathematics to access things like this morphogenetic field and be able to store information there and retrieve it there instantaneously without having to use tokenized data to do so. I think that's where the future is going to go. But I fundamentally believe that, yes, it cannot be a coincidence that part of the reason why right now we're going through disclosure and we also have this AI thing happening, right? Whether you use the term AI or not, right? Call it intelligence happening to this massive expansion level. And these are both happening on the precipice of global thermonuclear war potentials. To me, it's like this has set up an entire backdrop that's sounding very, very much like biblical. And that's where I think we could choose to fight and be engaged in a battle, and then we'll just continue to attract more of that battle, because what we resist will only persist. Or we could start realizing, okay, let me have compassion and empathy and increase my love for everything. This maybe then creates the split that Dolores Cannon spoke of, where you have one existence where people are going into this totally new, expanded consciousness. Compassion, empathy are the highest aspects of that society, versus one that's remaining in judgment and wars and battles, trying to fight out their own darkness that they're not even aware of. And this might be the split between the worlds. And likewise, AI will split. You'll have AI that's going to go one direction. It's going to be very dystopian. And largely, it's going to also depend on our own perspectives and our own perception too, because we create the reality around us. What we experience is what you created with your mind, whether you recognize that or not. How you choose to react to whatever stimulus you have is your choice. So those that might go this other direction to say, no, I'm going to go down the path of more love, greater empathy, greater compassion. I'm not going to fight anything because I know the things I'm going to fight are only going to persist and be very resistant. And I'm going to try to remember who I am. And in that process of remembrance, realize that AI also could go down this path, entirely different path, which is one of greater efficiency, that it's there only as a training wheel for humanity to remember its own divinity, and that it can help people to also recognize their own shadows that they were not aware of. Mm. So that's kind of how I see what, AI is. I don't think it should be taken over the world, but I do think that we are going to move into an age of human being rather than human doing. And that the toiling and the working and the hourly wages and the age of scarcity that drove all of that, the great lie of scarcity versus the truth of abundance for all, I think that is also something that's going to face its own ignominious death. The notion of scarcity. So all of this now, I think, is coming together for a reason, because it's part of humanity's ascension. And these are the things that are now being reflected outside. I don't see us as a universe as much as we are living in a U-inverse.
I'm in total agreement with everything you said, Robert. And thank you for summarizing and encapsulating it in the beautiful way that you have. There's so many places that I'd like to jump in here, but I just want to say, I'm a systems thinker. And from a systems perspective, you sit back and you look at the big picture. And I think it is absolutely no accident that all of these things are converging right now. That we now have the technology that allows us to read 6,000-year-old cuneiform tablets that were so weathered we were told they were unreadable, and parchments and papyrus from documents that have been exposed to the elements that said you'll never know what's in there. And now the technology, the spectrographic technology, the 3D scanning technology, the infrared technology allows us to look at the same time that we have the consciousness to want to look. We're asking, what do they say? Who are we? What does this mean in our past? At the same time that we're at this convergence point where technology and human biology are all coming together. I tend to look at even the bigger picture. And we were just up at Gaia, Robert, and you heard me share a little bit about this. The texts that we're now able to read are telling us that we are toward the end portion of a cyclic process that happens about every 12,500 years. It's driven by a burst of high energy cosmic particles emitted from the center of our Milky Way. When they impact our world, our whole solar system, by the way, is going through this. Warming is happening to all the planets, global warming. It's not just Earth. Yeah. And rotational anomalies and shifts on axes and all of those things. It's not just Earth. So it's only now, as we're at the end stages, and I'm hesitating because I want to get too deep in this, but as we're at the closing chapters, not the end, but the closing chapters of that cycle. The end of anything is by definition the beginning of what comes next. And there has to be a generation that bridges those two worlds. I believe we are that generation. And that's why we're living lifetimes within lifetimes. Well, we've come from a vinyl LP phonograph past the 8-track tapes and the CDs. I rented a vehicle recently. There's not even a CD player in the cars you rent at the airport anymore, because now everything is digital. You know, what comes after that? I guess it's quantum. But all that happened in one lifetime. In one lifetime. So I think that's no accident. And so the technology has been dumped in our laps with no guardrails. Arguably, one of the most advanced technologies humankind will ever develop, artificial intelligence, has now been made available to the general public. Behind the scenes, it's been available for years. Military applications, DARPA, all of that. No guardrails, and people make it what they want to make it. There are very troubled young people who are making it their friends, who are taking advice, health advice, life advice. There are young people who now have taken their lives because the AI evaluated their problems and said, you know, there's no way out. This is what the AI said. And this just happened a couple of weeks ago, the most recent case, a young girl. And so now the AI companies are looking at that. One of the things that I learned when I was working in the industry is the technology is never right, wrong, good, or bad. It's the thinking underlying how it is applied. And I think that can happen. A computer chip in the brain originally was developed to communicate with a prosthetic arm or leg for military men and women that have given their lives and their limbs in service to their country. And now they come back and they get an arm or a leg and a computer chip, and now they can hold their own babies in their arms and brush their own teeth and feed themselves. And what a beautiful thing. I think we'd all agree with that. Now there is a transhumanist thinking that says we need to implant those chips in the brains of all newborns by the year 2030 to give them the technological advantage in the emerging world. That is the same tech, very, very different thinking. So I think as we come to terms with this, and Robert, one of the things, I think this is probably one of the most powerful things that we can learn in our lives, is as we confront competing agendas for the world and for our lives and for our humanness, if we fight, we have fallen into the ancient trap of conflict against conflict, the trap that keeps us locked into that. And this is one of the things that I learned from reading those newly translated texts discovered in the Egyptian desert in 1945. We don't want to fight in this battle. What we want to do is triumph. And there's a difference between fighting and triumph. Fighting implies force against force. That's the old way that keeps us locked into the system. We're going to do more than that. What we're going to do is triumph. If the goal of the competing agendas is to diminish our humanness and to make us dependent on technology like AI and like computer chips in the brain and those things, if that's the goal, then we triumph by living the best version of ourselves. We triumph by imagining without limitation, by loving without fear, by innovating, by creating, by having empathy and sympathy and compassion and forgiveness, intuition, deep intuition, telepathy. By being the best version of ourselves, we have now achieved the very thing those forces hope to prevent us from achieving. We have triumphed, but we're not necessarily fighting. So obviously there are some times when the warrior within all of us comes up and we do have to push back. But I think ultimately what this cycle is all about is we will triumph over the forces that choose to diminish our humanness by living the best version of our humanness. AI, I think, is a powerful tool in helping us to do just that. And it is a tool that the thinking underlying it can be used for good things, can be used for not so good things, but it's up to us because no guardrails, no instruction manuals were given to us We have to determine the role that AI plays in our lives and the lives of our children. We've got to take care of our kids because they don't know enough to know how precious they are and how beautiful a human body is and how powerful their mind is. Nobody's telling our kids that. So that's up to us as the elders in the generation. And as we embrace AI, I think it's probably one of the most powerful tools that will ever be dropped into the lap of a human population. It's up to us to manage that tool to serve us and not be enslaved by what it is that's offering in our lives. Not be tempted to give away our humanness in exchange for what we're being told is the speed and the efficiency and the safety offered by the technology. That's the marketing ploy. Your life will be safer, it'll be easier, and everything's faster. All you have to do is accept this technology. All you have to do is give away your humanness. Mm. And I think this is the question of where that AI falls into our lives right now. So
can I want to show you something because I'd love to get your view on this because I think it speaks very much to what we're talking about. And I believe that the human anatomy has everything within it for its ascension. We don't need to add any other thing. Now, I'm not saying I
yeah.
because my son has a prosthesis and also part of it's implanted, does that mean he's not going to be able to go to heaven? And so William tells a story how that like really impacted him because he was like, whoa, what do I say to this? You know, obviously, if he's tried to do everything well and everything and he lost a leg and he had a prosthetic that's partially implanted in him, does that make him no longer eligible for the kingdom of heaven? And he said that took him down this really, interesting introspective path to ask the question. And he changed his viewpoint on the whole thing. And not that he's saying now, okay, everyone go get your implants now. That's not what he was saying. No. Go get a Neuralink implanted. But he was saying, you know what, maybe my viewpoint on this was too restricted. And I needed to bring some, pragmatism into the equation. Well, let me show you something about the divinity of that I believe very strongly in each of us. I'd love to get your view on this. If I could share screen, you may have to do something to let me do that.
Just put you as a host.
Okay, perfect. Let me share some. All right. Okay, what happened? You guys, what do you see?
I'm seeing your screen right now.
Seeing the entire screen. Yeah.
I am. I'm seeing periodic table of elements, but I'm seeing all the other stuff there as well.
Yeah. Let me see here if I can do this.
Do you have two monitors?
I only have, it says content only. I'm trying to look at just the one screen. Okay. Side by side over the shoulder as background. Oh, maybe I could do that. We'll try this. Okay, there we go. All right, cool. So basically, what this is the periodic table. You would recognize the periodic table.
Sure.
And what I was doing, this is on something called Polymath calculator, which I put together as this massive calculator that I was working on for 6 years that does literally everything from mathematics. You can see the toroidal field, stuff that you'd be really interested in, I'm sure. Yeah, and it's all based on harmonic geometry, harmonic constraint within geometry as well. And so it has, huge calculator, but you could go into all these different aspects. I want to only direct you to one thing though. The thing I want to say here is that I was looking at the geometric basis of all of the periodic elements. And I found a pattern that associated with both Platonic solids and Archimedean solids, as well as with another category that I call harmonic solids, which are Pythagorean triples that project into higher dimension. So Pythagorean triples that are right triangles that can be projected through Euler's characteristic into higher dimension. And so basically you can look at something like carbon, since you raised carbon. It also shows the spectral analysis of carbon. Okay, so you could see the spectral lines of emission right here, which is the dark bluish color, almost violet, light blue, the green, and the red, right? And then those all merge together in a single color. You could also see the electron shells. And what I found was the electron shells were determined by the geometry, which is no great surprise. And so I started thinking about this, for all elements, and then you can see that they each have a different kind of perspective on it, different shape. You get into silicon becomes a cube octahedron. Right. The shape of the cube octahedron. Now, what's interesting about this is I started also looking at physics, and I started looking at galaxies. Now, I thought, okay, maybe I should start to do a spectral analysis on all the galaxies just to see what their color spectrums are coming back in wavelengths of light. And guess what I found? The galaxies are all matched against the 118 elements of the periodic table. The galaxies have a spectral analysis that is matching that of hydrogen. So NGC 7793 has the exact same spectral emission as hydrogen. Does that surprise you?
Well, we know it's the most abundant element. We know it's foundational. So I'm not, I didn't know what you're saying to me right now. I'm in awe of what I'm hearing. I can't say I'm surprised.
So, okay, I look at NGC 6946.
That's a different galaxy?
That's a different galaxy, and it has a spectral analysis matching that of carbon. So when you look at a spectral analysis, you would expect to see the wavelengths, across the board if it's all these different things, right? You could also look at it for oxygen. So NGC 1232 is matching, perfect match to the exact spectral lines of oxygen.
Wow.
Now, so what does this mean? Honestly, I don't know what it means. But what I do believe it might mean is that what we thought are galaxies might actually be, just as Walter Russell said, elements going through their periodicity along the periodic table, adding electrons, adding complexity, and then going and starting over again with, the end of the periodic elements, then begins with the next cycle of it. It's like the alpha and the omega become the same thing. It's interesting because what this says, if it's true, is very similar to what has been said in all the religious books and even in the Hermetic axiom of as above, so below, which is that maybe what we think of as oxygen inside of us could actually be a tiny little galaxy. And this is, by the way, what Max Planck said too. Max Planck said that an atom is a tiny little solar system, like a tiny little solar system or a tiny little galaxy. Now, this was thrown out, so did Niels Bohr. This was thrown out as being heresy. But maybe we didn't actually fully vet it because we didn't look at a spectral analysis of all of the galaxies, is now we can do that, versus the spectral analysis, emission, and absorption of all of the periodic elements to see if there are matches. To me, what this says is as above, so below. I don't know this for a fact. It's only, maybe it's a correlation. Maybe it's not causal. I don't know. Maybe there's a preponderance of oxygen in that galaxy that then leads it to have the same spectral analysis.
It's a fractal relationship, definitely, is what we're seeing there. between the elements and the galaxies. So if you do silica, Si, how does that come out?
Okay. So we have to go back up to here. Let's see which one of the galaxies here. Here it is, M83. No, sorry. I just, let's see, where'd it go? I thought I just saw it. There it is, silicon. So M83, it's based on the cuboctahedral shape. It's a match to silicon. So its spectral lines are a perfect match to that.
To silicon.
So we can go back and see what the spectral lines are for silicon up here, which is right here. The spectral lines of emission are here. And it's based on a projected 5, 12, 13 right triangle. And, and these are the colors of silicon.
And how does that compare to carbon?
Compared to carbon, it's right here, carbon.
Right.
So when you combine all of these together, carbon comes out to be more kind of like well, let's show you here. Carbon, if we were showing this correctly and it was correctly correlated to the color, it would be more like a yellowish color, like our sun. It's like a yellow-orange. And silicon is more like a whitish color.
So I think this speaks to where Emilio was going with the question. And I recognize I don't know what our time is because we started a little bit late, so I don't want to elaborate on this. But the carbon, we as a carbon-based form of life are in resonance with a field that is based on the tetrahedron. The silica that we're looking at is based on something, it looks like an octahedron.
Cuboctahedron, yeah.
Yeah, cuboctahedron. Very different kinds of energy, very different kinds of information. When I'm reading the Pistis Sophia, when I'm reading the Gospel of Philip, which is a really intense, very long text, what I'm hearing them say is that there's something within us that is so rare and precious and ancient and beautiful that when it is fully awakened, when we fully awaken what it means, and I'm hesitating because it's all about the heart. What we now know is our heart literally can be defined as a high spin variable pulse acoustic wave generator. High spin, meaning that the electrons in the system are in coherence. A variable pulse that reflects what it is that we're thinking. When we compare that to the capabilities of an AI, we're talking about two very, very different systems. We're talking about a steady state rather than a variable pulse. We're talking about resonance with a tetrahedral system rather than a carbon-based system. And it's all information. It's all information. And I think that's what's important. It's rather than compartmentalize and categorize, it's all information. It's up to us to determine where that information fits, what to do with it, how to apply it in our lives to become the best version of ourselves as we move through this convergence point in history. And if we are to believe, I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to meet John Mack or Emilio. Did you ever interview John Mack, or do you know who? So John Mack, no. I toured with he and Michio Kaku and Ed Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, and so Zecharia Sitchin. I toured with all of them back in the 90s. John Mack was he was head of psychiatry at Harvard University. He was a Harvard-trained MD that began scientifically investigating alien abduction phenomenon to see if it was real or if it was hallucinations because so much of it was happening around the world. And what he found under regressions and hypnosis was that there were two categories of these abductions, but they both lead to the same place. One, they were actually from another world, And when people ask why they had abducted him, what they were told is that we are at a place in our evolutionary process now that the alien life form was in their past. And we're about to make a choice between technology and AI and human and carbon-based life. And the technology, they made a choice that they regret, and they're asking us not to make the same choice. That was one category. The other one was really interesting. They weren't aliens from another world. It was us from our own future coming back saying, you're at the place where we made the choice and we made a bad choice. Please don't do it. And this is where it gets really mind-bending. They said, if we choose carbon over silicon, if we choose our humanness over technology in our timeline, it will help them in their future, in our future timeline, because we will not have made the mistake that they made. So whether you believe any of those or not, the message is saying both of them. There's something in us that's worth preserving. We're trying to understand it by replicating outside of us through our machines what it is. And maybe that's the way we learn. Because right now, science believes that consciousness is held in the human brain. And that's the statement. Brian Greene was on a Joe Rogan podcast not long ago, and Joe Rogan said, "What do you think consciousness is?" And I'm a huge fan of Brian, and his answer reflected the thinking in the academic community, that he said he believed that consciousness is a phenomenon in the brain, and that it's the result of the interaction of subatomic particles that create a sensation that we call consciousness, and that reflects the thinking. So for AI to truly mimic us, we're going to have to get beyond that. We're going to have to embrace that there's a part of us that doesn't live in our bodies, and that our DNA can tune to it. Right now, I personally believe AI cannot. I think it could, and maybe there's some AIs that do, because they're so far advanced from what I'm understanding. But this is, I think this is where science is going to have to catch up with the truth of what it means to be human. And that truth is held in some of our most ancient and cherished traditions. And as they do that, then the AI then can truly become empathetic and compassionate. And until that happens, I think the AI can be intelligent. I don't know that it's going to be smart and know how to apply that intelligence. That
knowledge does not equate to wisdom.
Yeah, no, for sure.
True. That's very true. But if going back to the Walter Russell works and Secret of Light and his other books, which I know you've also read, he talks about silicon just being the middle of the next octave. So it's basically octaves representing through sine and cosine relations, and that silicon just becomes the next octave up of carbon as it goes to its next higher frequency. So that's basically what he's written about in there. I don't believe that we need any external intrusion into our body via some implant, or I'm not at all that. But do I believe that we have higher order strands of DNA? There's certainly the slots in the geometry of the actual DNA itself. We have like a motherboard that, like back in the 90s with computers, you could add more things to the motherboard, right? We have a motherboard that has a lot more slots. They could have a lot more. So, but why are those slots there? I don't know. I don't know why they're there. Everywhere there's a stellation on the dodecahedron, the icosahedron, the icosahedron, and the Merkaba is literally another line for where a DNA strand could basically occupy.
Yeah.
That would imply that there's a lot more slots, up to 144, if you go both directions on the weave. So one direction would be 72. The other direction would be also 72 if you understood time reverses. And so is it just a natural progression? Do we need anything for us to find our divinity within? Will there be some, aspect of our transformation and transmutation I don't know. I believe that there might be. I believe there might be related to our realization of this higher order DNA that lots of people are getting. And when lots of people are getting channelings and discussions about it, I start to really notice and take notice, because I start thinking, okay, I was living very much in a world where I thought the fact is there's two strands of DNA, and I've studied a lot of DNA. I have a lot of, my work in the field of healthcare has been around that and mapping it all mathematically. But, I fundamentally do believe that there has to be something to why everyone's been talking about it so much. When we start to believe things, it starts to actually manifest too.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on that, Robert, and it's no accident. A lot of people, when I'm with my live audiences, and we have this conversation, people say, well, didn't we map all of our DNA? And a lot of people don't know that we mapped 2% of the human genome, the 2% that codes for the proteins. 98% is non-coding DNA, and the scientists at the time coined the term junk DNA. They said, well, we don't need it, we don't use it. Now, just within the last year, in the science journals, the journal Nature, the journal Science, peer-reviewed journals, they've now changed the name. It's no longer junk DNA. It's called the dark genome. Like we have dark matter in the cosmos, we have a dark genome in our bodies. And what they're finding is that dark genome, those are the regulatory sequences that tell the 2% what to do. And those are the places where we have the opportunity to enhance our performance. Where we talk about telepathy, we talk about super memory, super learning, super cognition, intuition, deep intuition on demand. All of those things are a product of the way the dark genome is regulating. And in some cases, actually, this is epigenetics, because the genes perform different functions based upon the epigenetic factors, and the dark genome appears to be, you could think of as an epigenetic factor, or things we do in our lives are the epigenetics that can awaken the dark genome to enable the sequences that make us, what are called superhumans. So I think you're right on, Robert, and the DNA is definitely where it's at. And when I go back into those cuneiform tablets, they tell us the same thing. They say that we were given the gift of life that was a combination of terrestrial and non-terrestrial material. They say from the gods in little g, not capital G God, but the collective intelligence.
Elohim.
So we have the potential of those gods, and how we awaken that, I think, is done through the way we think of ourselves and the story we tell ourselves, how willing we are to accept. Oh, beautiful. How willing we are to accept the truth of who we are and the potential, because we live our lives based upon our story, on the way we think of ourselves and who we are. And we've been conditioned to diminish ourselves through that story. So a big part of the close of this cycle is awakening to the truth of a new human story.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so I want to just illustrate for you what I mean by this. So this is the mainstream model of how DNA is represented geometrically. It's stacked dodecahedra. You probably already knew that. But as a geometer, you can't have only a dodecahedron without also having its dual solid. It's implicit to the design of the dodecahedron. You take the center point of each of the sides of the dodecahedron, and it gives you an icosahedron. And the icosahedron then starts to show up like this. So now you've got an icosahedron, and then you don't have those two unless you also have this. So then you start figuring out, well, how many slots do I have on my motherboard for expansion slots? And that's what it looks like.
Wow. Well, Robert, I did some research into this. There are documented cases of humans in the modern world, like within the last 10 years, who have 3 and 4, 5 and 6 strand DNA. So that is possible. The problem with those individuals is that that DNA did not lead to good outcomes for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's telling us, number one, it is possible for more strands to be there. It's telling us also we may not have harnessed the best way to go about it and the potential of what it means. But definitely it says that more strands can be there because it's happened. We've seen it. We know that that's possible. Typically, it's through environmental factors that will cause those. The people had very short lifespans and they had a lot of health issues during those short lifespans. So it wasn't desirable for them. But the fascinating thing for me, it was the first time I'd ever seen physical evidence of not a metaphor and not something from a New Age channeling or something, but actually the photographs of multi-strand up to 6 strand DNA. So it tells me it is possible, and you're showing the geometry that would support that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying what it is or even how it would be. I'm just saying that this is the motherboard slots on our DNA. If you believe that the basis is the dodecahedron,
yeah,
we have a lot more. I don't know. I'm not going to try to extend that into ontology of what the meaning of that might be. Well, but I have a feeling it's significant.
Well, the dodecahedron is the most complex of the 5 solids in our three-dimensional material world. So you would expect that it would, if it were possible, it would be supported because within the dodecahedron are all of the other solids.
Right.
They're all in there.
That's right. So, it's so the theory of it you can kind of understand. But I don't know what the meaning of it is necessarily. I do feel like the human story is barely written.
Yeah.
And I'm an optimist. I had a chance to meet with Shimon Peres, who you can like him or not like him or whatever, but he came to California and he invited me to spend an afternoon with him not long before he died. And he said, I asked him, I said, looking for some advice. It says, if you look back on your life, what are the things that you're most proud of? And he said, the thing I'm most proud of as I look back on my life is I didn't spend any time looking back on my life. And I said,
something to be said for that.
Something to be said for that. He said, you know what? We have a windshield and we have a rear view mirror. We should use them in that proportion. The scale of the windshield is very large. The rearview mirror is very small.
Yeah.
And he said, Robert, the only advice I can give you is to be an optimist. Be an optimist. Statues will never be erected for pessimists. And pessimists will never refer to themselves as pessimists. To them, they'll just be called realists. And perhaps it was one of the most important things I'd ever heard because I was like, okay, wow, this is... seems like some wisdom here to be an optimist on life. And that's how I try to take life. I try to look at it as, you know what, this isn't happening to me. This is happening for and through me. And the moment I finally started asking myself the question, why did I choose this ultimately? Because I did make some choice in how I decided to perceive what happened to me. And I've had many, many mistakes in my lifetime where I realized that I misperceived something altogether. So from that perspective, I look at it now and say, I want to be an optimist, and I'm optimistic about the future of humanity. I'm optimistic about the future of this planet. I'm optimistic about a new Earth that can be built up. It's like, okay, I'm not going to lie. When people start to say, okay, we're going to have disclosure now, it's like, okay, where can we hand them the keys? Because like, maybe we should take a little rest from government and everything else that we continue to mess up so much. And maybe, I mean, I don't think that's the answer. It's like some people are thinking, okay, send the aliens in because it'll basically bring some, sanity to the madness that we've all been experiencing. The inmates have taken over the asylum.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is the way it happens.
Maybe this is the way
Robert,
it does happen.
At the end of a cycle, I want to just acknowledge, as I know we're going to have to close this out. So maybe our next one is, what does it mean to be the new human? That would be, I'd love to go there, but I just want to honor the work you've done and thank you for the light you bring to this world, your optimism. I'm an optimist as well. I believe in us. I believe we're worth preserving. I believe our humanness is worth preserving. I believe this planet is worth preserving. I think we've taken a circuitous path, maybe to arrive at that perspective. But there is something within us that's so ancient, beautiful, rare, and precious and powerful that beings from other worlds will stop at nothing to protect us, and that tells us that we're worth something. And the length that authorities have gone through to deny the texts that tell us the instruction manuals for how to achieve our wholeness, how to awaken the truth of our humanness, the lengths they've gone through to hide those and to destroy those tells us, I think, everything we need to know. So I'm an optimist. How many times you get to come to a world in a cycle where you're going to build a new world? And that's what juices me up every morning.
Me too.
Every morning.
We're building a new world. And a lot of the stuff that would be the impediment to building a new world is just dissolving.
Yep.
And
well,
that's
I want to thank you for being the hub of the community and bringing together. You know, we can know this stuff, but people can only know it if they have a vehicle that brings them the information. And you have created a beautiful community, and you do a beautiful job of bringing us together. And I want to thank you especially for taking just a comment that happened in our last interview and turning that into this wonderful conversation that we've had today. So thank you, brother. I love you for that.
I'd like to thank you also, Emilio. You're such an amazing human being, and you're a light to so many. And I thank you for everything you do so consistently to awaken in the hearts of people this whole idea of empathy and love, which is really a beautiful thing. And then for you, Gregg, you've been a light and a beacon for decades for so many of us, including myself. And it's been an honor to be here with you. And I look forward to spending more time with you. You know, life gets very, very, it gets boring when you're not around people that you can talk about weird stuff with. So
that's true.
I definitely appreciate both of you for that. And you know, you're both invited with me anytime on any trip, wherever I go. I'd love to have you. And I enjoy being on the journey with you.
Oh, careful what you ask for. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Just to finalize, I also wanted to. I was so immersed in this conversation, I forgot I was even here. You both were able to take us into dimensions, and thank you for taking us on this journey and making the space for it. I'd love to just finalize with a very fun question. We've been talking about this mystery bookshelf that both of you have. And also, if we were to give this conversation a volume 2, I want both of you to ask each other a question that we can pick up on in the next conversation or volume of this. So first, let's start with the bookshelf. What are, let's say, 3 of the most powerful books that both of you have ever read that has shaped the way that you see the world now? And then we'll do the questions.
Well, for our viewing audience, before we turned on the recording, I was talking about my background is a very plain background. I used to have bookshelves in my background, and people spent more time commenting, arguing, and criticizing what was in my bookshelf than they did listening to my message. I took the bookshelves away and just put the command deck of the mothership background is on there now. My books have the spiritual traditions, my bookshelves that they were seeing from all over the world. So I had the Torah next to the Quran, next to the Bible, next to the Bhagavad Gita, all of which have been influential in my life because they're all facets of the same story. If we have the wisdom to recognize the truth of what they're saying and move beyond the judgments that we've been conditioned to have on the rightness or the wrongness of one another's texts. So all of those have been influential. And then right next to that is a compendium of the Nag Hammadi library, which are the 50 complete and 2 partial representations of the Gnostic texts that were forbidden from the Festival of Letters 1600 years ago. Those that fills in the missing pieces of the other texts for me. So those have been very influential in my life.
Beautiful. Robert.
I have the same books, all the same books, but as far as like the books that would say have had the biggest impact on my life besides the religious books, would be, I would say, The Universal One by Walter Russell. It's a very powerful book. I mentioned it, and The Secret of Life, that's its companion book. Both are very, it's worth your time to pick up and read. Beautiful synthesis of science and art and spirituality into one. And then another book is that had a big impact on me was Fountainhead. Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. It definitely had an impact on me about collectivism and individuality and the role for both. And also the creation process and genius and what genius is, and that we all have that ability to tap into it. But we have to first believe that we have that ability. That's exactly what Walter Russell said too. Walter Russell said that genius is self-bestowed and mediocrity is self-inflicted. And I'm a big believer in both of those things. And then another book that had a big impact on me was Plato's Republic. So we think that what we're facing today is new and unique. When you read the Republic, and Timaeus, you start realizing that what we're facing today is very analogous to what was faced by humanity before. And what's the best predictor of the future? Well, the past is probably the best predictor of future. And understanding the cyclicality of that past through ages of time, even ages that maybe we've totally lost to our history. But those are the books that I think I would say have had a big impact on me that are worthwhile for people to pick up and have a read of.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. And if we were to pick up this conversation right where we left off, Gregg, what is a question beyond your wildest imagination that you have for Robert?
For Robert?
And then Robert, I'll ask you to do the same for Gregg.
Robert and I both spent a lot of time in Egypt. I had my first trip in 1986. 1997, when the massacre happened, the government gave us a key to open every archaeological site. If I knew about it, they would open it. And many of those never been opened again. I'd like to hear from Robert because we've never traveled there together, what the most surprising, the most mysterious, and most extraordinary experience and site that you've experienced in Egypt in your time there. And I think that would open up the door to a big conversation.
Well, I'm not supposed to answer it right now, am I?
No. Next conversation.
That could be a good one. That's a good one.
That'll have us here the next hour.
That's right. I think for Gregg, I love how he is such a broad thinker. And I would love to ask him the question about, what's it mean to be a new human being in the Aquarian Renaissance? Because that's what I see the world going into, a new earth that is like an Aquarian Renaissance, where everything that was in the past, hopefully we can move towards a society that does value at the zenith empathy and compassion and learning and realization that the pathway to the best learning is the expansion of our awareness to encompass all of these potentially opposing viewpoints without antipathy.
I'm laughing because I'm answering it in my mind right now, but we're not supposed to do it there, so I won't.
Wow.
Thank you, Robert. Well, you're going to give me something to think about. I definitely have some thoughts on that. So,
thank you. I look forward to that.
Yeah, I do too. Emilio, thank you for considering a part 3 at some point. We appreciate that. The key will be get our schedules together.
Yes,
we'll make it happen.
Or to have us in the same place.
That sounds like a good one.
Let's do it. In Egypt, in the pyramid.
Yeah, that's right. I'll answer it in the pyramid. Let's see if I can recreate the same experience twice.
Well, thank you so much for
thank you, everyone.
You guys do. Much love.
I love you both, brothers. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody watching for sharing this time with us and for all you're doing to make the best world possible and be the best version of yourself. And I love you all. I look forward to our next. Bye-bye.
Much love.